Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Alex Hernandez of Noticias Univision Chicago, which airs every weekday morning at 5 and 6. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, women in the U.S. are being incarcerated at a rapidly increasing rate. We talk about the challenges they face and the other side of prison walls upon returning home. Advice for parents on how to protect their kids from sexual abuse and how to empower their children to protect themselves. Ricardo Gamboa offers La Última Palabra on putting a spotlight on Latino art and artists on Chicago stages.
It's important, the ingredients, they are important, but more important is that you put your heart there.
And we wrap up Hispanic Heritage Month by taking you inside a Mexican ice cream parlor. All that coming up. But our first story tonight, life after incarceration. That's after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
Nationwide, the number of women in prison is exploding. Between 1980 and 2020, there has been 475% increase of incarcerated women, according to the data from the Sentencing Project. More than half of those women are mothers to children under 18. In our Permanent Punishment series, Brandes Friedman explored the many ways that the effects of incarceration can last long beyond the time they've served in prison. Here's Maria Garza, co-founder of the nonprofit Challenge to Challenge, talking about her own past incarceration experience.
And as soon as you start talking about incarceration or the backgrounds come up, you know, the one-sided narratives of what the charge is. So you look at drug trafficking, you look at murder, you know, they don't see the circumstances behind those things.
Joining us now with more are Alana Gunn, Assistant Professor of Law, Criminality and Justice at the University of Illinois, Chicago; Celia Colon, founder of the nonprofit Given Other Streams; and Maria Garza, co-founder of Challenge to Change. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. And I want to start with you, Maria Garza. Thank you for joining us as well remotely. We just heard you talking about facing stigmas and barriers after your incarceration. Can you tell us about that experience?
Applying for, you know, apartments when you have to give a historical background of your workforce and why, you know, there is that large gap. You know, the questions come about and you can be honest about it, where everyone is encouraged to, and I have, just to see what the process is like. And even though many times, you know, applying for an apartment, things like that, they don't say nothing, but you can tell when there's no return call,
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough situation. And we know you're back in school now. What has that experience of getting your degree been like for you so far?
Well, it has been difficult in the sense that, you know, I started with Northwestern's prison education program while I was still at Logan Correctional Center. And at the time of my release, how my education was going to continue, you know, obviously it was hard, you know, the funding. So clearly, you know, I can't come out of prison after almost 13 years and think of the amount of debt for such a high-end university. That it would be to continue my education. And then there's all of the barriers that they are when you come out because of the collaboration that there is still with the Illinois Department of Corrections and me being a parolee and the limitations that there are with the communication with my cohort, the students that are still on that side of the fence. So it has been challenging, but Northwestern has fought for my education. And currently I'm taking 2 classes right now. So, but again, I'm pushing through because to not do so is to say what from a lot of times has been said about women, that we can't do this and do that. Right. But I can work, I can still be a mother, I can still be a friend, a daughter, and I still can go to school.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. And Celia, you were also featured in the Permanent Punishment series. Here's actually a clip where you talk about getting your record sealed.
There's just so many reasons why I needed to get my case sealed. I wanted to have a second chance of, you know, being this person that doesn't have a record and is seen as this worst of society, right? Because that's what people think of you.
Celia, what has record sealing allowed you to do since you returned?
What has record sealing does? I would say there's a myth into sealing your record because I'm still facing permanent punishments. I don't call myself a returning citizen. I call myself a justice impacted person because there's lots of barriers that me and my family face. There's lots of generational harm that never leaves us due to me having a background. So even though I have my record sealed and I have degrees and I have certificates and I sit on every state and government board doing national systemic work, right, really impacting lives, none of this really matters when it comes to having a background and having a number. Society always wants to label you as the worst mistake that you ever had. Like if you're not any different from any other human being. I don't know why it's hard for people to believe that people with records can have the same human experience as you, right? We evolve every day. We can never move backward. We're always changing. We're made out of water. We're always moving forward. None of us can repeat any step we took in our past, but yet society tends to punish us and our families for generations to come.
Right. Alana, what are women's experiences in and out of prison different from their male counterparts?
I would definitely say when we think about women who have had criminal legal involvement, we're really talking about a pipeline, a trauma to prison to enduring trauma pipeline. We're talking about women who've disproportionately had experiences of myriad trauma over their life cycle as a child, as an adult, in intimate partner violence dynamics and experiences. So we're talking about, and we're also talking about women who experience disengagement and disruption due to systems that failed them, due to systems that did not create the access and the supports that they needed. Being young, one being the educational system, one being child welfare system. So we're really talking about trauma over the developmental life cycle of women. That doesn't stop, exactly like what my peers are saying, that doesn't stop when one comes out of prison. We're then talking about community forms of supervision that serve as another form of surveillance, where we're talking about women that have had experiences with addiction and possibly mental health disorders.
So many issues, absolutely. We're cutting it short here, under 3 minutes, but we have more questions, obviously. Celia, how does being a mother affect finding employment, for example, for women re-entering after incarceration?
So that's one of the biggest topics, and I'm glad that you brought this question up, that society doesn't understand or even look at. Unlike our male counterparts, when they come home, 90% of the time they're not the primary caregiver. It's usually the mom, the woman. So 86% of women in prison are primary caregivers. When we come home, we have more programming to do, mandated by the state. So you're in this, I like to say, this cycle of destruction and despair, because as a woman, if your kids are with the state or under foster care, you have mandated supervised visits before you have single visits on your own, right? There is parenting classes, there's substance abuse classes, there's any kind of alcohol and drug evaluations. Even if you didn't have a drug or alcohol case, you will have to do these prior to getting your children back. So there's like a list of things that you would have to do while you're trying to get a job, right? While you're trying to get this apartment that maybe you have 3 kids, so you need a 3-bedroom apartment. But here's the sticker. If I go get a job and you come at the same place, we have the same case, go to the same employer, right? And we both get this job, and then I have to turn around and tell my employer I have to take off for the first, week, for the first 90 days.
We're cutting it very short, and that's a very good point that you're making. Also, I want to go back with Maria, talking about reunification with children that can also be emotionally difficult. What challenges have you been encountering, Maria? And we're very short on time now.
Well, the challenges are, you have to disconnect yourself from feelings and emotions to be able to make it through a long length of stay, even short length of stays in prison. And you just don't come out and they just come back. So sometimes the communication, I didn't leave. I came back to not a 9 and a 10-year-old. They're grown young adults, and sometimes the emotional component isn't there when it comes to trying to reunify, trying to understand each other as new people.
Right. Definitely, it's a challenge. So my respect to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today. Our thanks to Maria Garza, Celia Colon, and Alana Gunn. You can catch up on our 4-part permanent punishment series on our website. Up next, advice for talking to kids about sexual abuse. Stay with us. For any parent, child sex abuse is a tough topic to even think about. But as uncomfortable as it might be, talking about sexual abuse with kids is one way parents can help protect them from it. According to the CDC, about 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys in the U.S. are sexually abused. 91% of abusers are known by the child or child's family. Female victims of child sexual abuse are at higher risk of sexual violence victimization in adulthood. And all victims of child sexual abuse are at twice the risk for non-sexual intimate partner violence. Joining us now with advice on how to start those conversations with kids and more is Tanya Haig, co-founder and president of Parents Against Child Sex Abuse. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Alex.
Tanya, I want to start talking about your organization. How did you come to start your organization, Parents Against Child Sex Abuse?
So thank you so much for having me, by the way. So 5 years ago, we go by the acronym PAXA because it's a lot of words in there, but very important ones. This situation impacted my family. And what we found was parents had not been in the conversation when it came to this topic. There's a lot of data that supports, leading up to our organization, how long this topic has been in medical journals, in white papers, as I like to call them, white paper land. But now we're at a place where, because of the Me Too movement, it's really reached at a level where the culture is much more informed about these circumstances. We've got adults talking about their childhood experiences. So when this all came about for us 5, 6, 7 years ago, we wanted to close that gap and help parents so they're not blindsided. They're more informed now than they've ever been before, and that's what we're trying to do.
Well, talk about the Kids Too movement. What is this?
Yes, so the Kids Too movement is on fire right now, Alex. We actually started using the hashtag Kids Too about a year ago, when we were participating in a coalition that brought a lot of other nonprofit organizations around the subject of online safety. What happened was the pandemic the data shows that over 20 million cases had been reported to the cyber tip line. That's where everyone calls in about online exploitation of children. COVID and the pandemic just blew the doors open of making social media platforms and technology expose the fact that kids were being victimized through social media and other tech platforms. So we started this rallying cry around this Kids Too movement that builds off of the Me Too movement. People get the connection, and we've really been on that road this past year, getting parents more aware and informed.
How soon do you think parents should talk with their kids, have conversations about potential sex abuse?
So, like you said at the beginning, this is a tough conversation or even thought to have. It's one that we always want to shove, but we know that it's out there, it's happening under our noses. So our point of view as an organization is that as soon as a kid is verbal, for some can vary, but let's say 2 years old, it starts talking to them about their bodies, and that conversation, obviously, it's very different from a 2-year-old to a 10-year-old to a 15-year-old. It never ends. It's about health, and that's really where we're coming from. It's marrying this concept of health and safety, and a lot of the times that topic is uncomfortable for parents, so they leave it to the school, and that's not enough.
So how can they adjust that conversation while their kids are growing? Like you're saying, it's a different conversation. How do parents adjust to that?
How they progress? Well, as a lot of parents know, when we start engaging with our kids and talking at their level at 2 years old, 5 years old, we always talk about meeting their kids where they are. So the conversation might start about their bodies and understanding what's okay and what's not okay. And then it starts, having check-ins with them about the adults that are around the kid. Are you comfortable around this uncle? How is this coach? And you just meet them at that level. And parents, for us, that kind of comes naturally over progression of time. What we want to invite parents to do is to keep having check-ins with them, not just about themselves, if they're seeing the behavior is a little bit different or their emotional state has changed or even physical sometimes, but also start asking them about the people that are around them, the kids, the teens, the cousins, the family members, the coaches, the teachers.
The adults, like you said, 'cause now that school is back in session, that is very important. And kids might feel, I don't know, uncomfortable or shy to tell their parents if something might be off. How can we make them feel comfortable to talk about that and report that maybe they feel uncomfortable with an adult?
Yes, so the more that we can encourage kids to use their voices and to trust that their information is going to be believed, that's such a barrier. Most of the time, kids don't get believed. This topic is highly underreported. Only 38% of kids actually disclose, and that's not even close to being representative of actually what's happening. So what we want to do is, as it comes from the parents, Alex, and that's what I'm really here to do, is empower other parents to let their kids know and then use their village to keep communicating.
This takes me to the red flags. What are the red flags that the parents should be looking out for?
Right, so there's so many documentaries out there right now. So hopefully in the culture, people are starting to know that this is very common. You have got national cases like the U.S. volleyball team. Basically, some of the predatory red flags are, it impacts parents and kids. If an adult's trying to isolate your child, meaning spend just alone time, it can seem so harmless sometimes. Oh, let me do this favor. That adult wants to be so helpful. Really, we want parents to be, instead of like, oh, thank God, someone's taking this kid off my hands, we want parents to be more protective, a little bit more of a guard up, and just be more in tune. So isolating the kid and treating that kid special, making that kid, exploiting their vulnerabilities is something to look out for.
Very quick, and just to end this, we've got less than 30 seconds. What steps can parents take?
Okay, first things first, we want parents to talk to their child. If they've never had this conversation, it's never too late. Ask them, has anyone ever made you feel uncomfortable? Has anyone tried to touch you inappropriately? And if anything ever happens, come to mom and dad. We'll believe you.
Definitely, very important.
Yep.
Our thanks to Tanya Haig for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And we're back with more Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, right after this. As Hispanic Heritage Month comes to a close, we're ending on a sweet note. Reporter Joanna Hernandez visits a business serving tasty desserts, but also creating opportunities for other Latinos. Joanna.
Thanks, Alex. Have you heard of La Michoacana ice cream shops? Well, if you haven't, I have a treat for you today. We are taking you inside a Mexican ice cream parlor serving more than just desserts.
This one is excellent. You're going to love it. Check it out. Check it out first.
Interacting with customers is just one part of the job.
That's for the gentleman. Gracias, Carlos.
Alfredo Garcia and his wife Irma have spent the last 2 years mastering their ice cream making skills.
And like you said, you put a lot of love in it.
Of course. That's the thing. If you do your job with love.
Cheers. Look at this. I just need you guys to see this. All the types of layers. And you can only find these kinds of ice cream in Michoacanas.
Exactly.
All right, cheers. It's just so good every time.
Ice cream is a huge deal in Mexico's western state of Michoacan. Business owners like Alfredo are sharing a piece of that sweet culture.
Pure goodness. So this is an example of that.
This is an example.
So this is filled with fruit.
That's fruit. It has like a chile on. It has different things, but doesn't have that much sugar. It's more fruit than sugar or anything artificial.
What do you call this paleta?
Escamocha.
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 From ice cream to paletas, known as popsicles, everything is homemade. We got an inside look at what it takes to make those tasty frozen treats. First step, have your mix ready to go.
And then I use stir.
Just dump it in there.
Dump it in there. But you have to be careful because Some of them are a little bit bigger, a little bit small.
Okay. Once the mix is spread evenly, the sticks are inserted into the mold.
So the machine should be at least 0 degrees, which is perfect right now.
Then it goes right into the popsicle machine to freeze for about an hour.
And that's it.
How many can you put in here?
5.
From working as a carpenter to owning his ice cream parlor, Alfredo shares his thoughts about the motivation behind his business.
¿Usted pensaba que iba a tener una tienda un día?
No, pero sí pensé todo el tiempo que yo tenía que hacer un negocio donde pudiera ayudar a mucha gente.
Knowing what it's like to migrate to a new country, Irma says she finds pride in giving people opportunities.
Y cuando ves las personas que acaban de llegar, que traen su dolor de haber dejado tu tierra, tu familia, y dices, aquí les puedes dar esa semillita de esperanza que sí se puede.
Downstairs, the paletas are ready.
Take the mold here, came here to the hot water. 5 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There it is.
I take the popsicles, we go in here. When we do that, because you can see the color on the popsicle change, it means they won't melt anymore.
I can smell the lemon. So if you're looking for something sweet, creamy, or fresh, this is the place to check out.
It's important, the ingredients, they are important, but more important is that you put your heart there. And it's how they become good.
As I mentioned, the history of La Michoacana goes back decades to a small town named Tocumbo in Michoacán. The brand has given people like the Garcias opportunities to open their own independent businesses. Now, Alex, we send it back to you.
Paletas de limón have to be the best. Joanna, thank you so much. I hope you brought some for all of us. Anyway, on other topics, the stories that can be told on a stage are limited only by the storyteller's imagination. That's the beauty of theater. But just who gets to write those stories and bring them to life on Chicago stages is often limited to a privileged few. Ricardo Gamboa counts playwright among his many roles in the theater scene. Here, he gives la última palabra on putting more Latinos and their stories in Chicago spotlight.
I'm Ricardo Gamboa. I'm an artist, activist, and academic born and raised in Chicago. I have a large Mexican-American family that's scattered across the South Side, and we would get together for family parties, and at every one of these parties, as it got late, they would start telling stories about growing up in Chicago. My family and my aunts and uncles, they would tell those stories over and over, because if they didn't, who would? So one of the things that became really important to me was creating theater that reflected where I came from. And then there, I started noticing a different trend, which is that what we call Chicago theater is hardly Chicago. Chicago is 1/3 Latino, and 80% of that demographic is Mexican American. And the reality is I'm the only Mexican American playwright in the city that's born and bred in the city that's ever been produced in the city. And I think that speaks a lot to the ways in which there aren't many opportunities for Latino creators and for Latino communities to kind of see themselves and their stories on stage. There's all sorts of ways in which people from Chicago's diverse communities, even in their own city, are kind of marginalized from having the means for cultural expression, or don't get to be counted as credible artists or credible bearers of culture, as credible cultural creators. We know that representation is important. We know it is empowering for people to be able to see themselves. But I think one of the things that we leave out with this question of representation, specifically in Chicago, is giving communities the resources and the ability to self-represent. We need to see major institutions in Chicago give their resources, give their platforms, give their stages to actual Chicago residents, to Chicago Latinos. We need to see things like press and theater critics going to see shows that Latinos put on. Some of the most important theater that's happening is theater that is happening in the community. So I want to see people, getting out the crib and going to see Latino theater in the city. Everyday people making choices to support Latino artists, to support Latino theater, and seeing all the amazing work that is happening there by community-led artists and community theater companies that are really making challenging, exciting, fun, accessible work.
You actually saw some images from pre-production on Gamboa's play The Wizards. It's a supernatural thriller set in 2016 Pilsen, and it opens this weekend with a run through November. You'll find more on that and more in our La Última Palabra series on our website. Well, that's going to be our show for this weekend. Be sure to visit our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. Don't forget also to tune in to Noticias Univision Chicago every weekday morning. I'll be waiting for you, obviously. And now that's it. From all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Alex Hernandez. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.